Hide my sister. Midnight knock at Hell's Angels' door. 99 bikers took a stand. The knock came when even fear was supposed to be asleep. 3 soft hits on a steel door at midnight, and a child's voice that didn't ask for help. It begged for mercy. Some doors are never meant to open after midnight. Some people are never supposed to answer them. But every once in a while, a moment chooses its witnesses. And when it does, ordinary people discover what they're willing to protect, no matter the cost. The Hells Angels Riverside Chapter Clubhouse sat at the edge of an industrial strip where the streetlights flickered and the pavement never quite felt safe. It was Tuesday, cold, late November cold that crawled into your bones. Inside, 15 bikers sat around a scarred oak table, half-empty coffee cups and old ashtrays spread between them. They were planning a toy drive, no music, no laughter, just low voices and tired faces. Then the knock came. It wasn't loud, it wasn't demanding, it sounded unsure. 3 taps, paused, then one more. Marcus Rook. Calder felt it in his chest before his ears registered it. He lifted his hand and the room went silent. Conversation stopped mid-word. Someone's chair creaked. Nobody moved. "That ain't a grown man," muttered Big Len from the corner. Rook stood, 44 years old, former army. A jagged scar ran from his collarbone to his neck, barely visible above his shirt. He walked toward the steel door, every step heavy with instinct. When he opened it, the night rushed in. Rain, cold, wind, and a boy. The kid couldn't have been older than 10. His hoodie was soaked through, one sleeve torn. Blood streaked down from his eyebrow, mixing with rainwater. His hands were shaking so badly they rattled against his ribs. But what froze Rook wasn't the boy. It was the baby in his arms. A tiny girl wrapped in a thin towel that had once been white. Her cheeks were pale, her lips slightly blue. She didn't cry, she barely moved. The boy looked up at Rook, tattoos, beard, size, and didn't step back. "Please," he said. His voice cracked but didn't break. "Can you hide my sister?" Rook's mouth went dry. "Just for tonight," the boy added. "He said he's coming. He said she won't see morning." Behind Rook, boots hit concrete. The other bikers had stood without realizing it. 15 men, leather, silence. The boy tightened his grip around the baby. "I walked everywhere," he whispered. "You were the only place with lights on." For a moment, nobody spoke. 15 men who'd stared down prison gates, gun barrels, and war zones stood rooted to the floor, undone by a child shaking in the rain. The baby let out a thin sound, barely a cry, more like a breath asking permission to exist. Rook knelt. He didn't think, didn't plan. His knees hit the concrete hard, but he didn't feel it. He brought himself eye level with the boy so the kid wouldn't have to look up anymore. "What's your name, son?" he asked. "Ethan," the boy said. "This is Rosie. She's my sister." "How old is Rosie?" "Almost 1. Rook nodded, slow and steady. "You did good getting her here." The boy's shoulders trembled. "He's mad I took her." Rook stood and turned his head slightly. "Heat, blankets, now." The room snapped alive. Someone killed the draft by pulling the door shut. Someone else cranked the heater. A massive biker named Cruz gently took the baby only after Ethan nodded yes. His hands, usually clenched into fists, shook as he wrapped Rosie in a dry blanket. Ethan didn't let go of the baby until she was warm, not fully. Just warm enough that her lips turned pink again. Only then did his legs give out. He sat on the floor, back against the wall, rain dripping off his hair. Nobody told him to move. Nobody rushed him. Rook crouched beside him again. "Tell me what happened." Ethan stared at his shoes. "My stepdad got out today. He said everything was fine. Then he waited till it was dark." The words came slow, like each one hurt to carry. "He said Rosie ruined his life, said babies don't remember pain anyway." Ethan swallowed. "He said he'd finish what he started." One of the bikers turned away. Another clenched his jaw so hard it popped. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Rook asked softly. Ethan let out a humorless laugh. "He did. He went with us." Silence fell heavy. "You were the scariest place I could think of," Ethan said, finally looking up. "Scary people stop worse people." Rook felt something shift inside his chest. "Kid," he said, voice low and certain, "you knocked on the right door." They gave Ethan dry clothes that hung loose on his frame. Someone found sneakers close enough to fit. Cruz sat on the couch with Rosie asleep on his chest, afraid to breathe too hard. Ethan sat at the table, staring at a plate of food like it might disappear if he touched it. "You can eat," Rook said gently. Ethan shook his head. "She goes first." A bottle appeared. Warm, ready. Ethan watched every second as Rosie drank, her tiny fingers curling around Cruz's thumb. Only when her eyes fluttered closed did Ethan pick up the fork. He ate fast, not messy, careful, like someone who learned early that food was temporary. Rook watched him. Every man did. "How far'd you walk?" someone asked. 4, maybe 5 miles, Ethan said. "I carried her most of it. She gets heavy when you're scared." That sentence sat in the room like a bruise. Rook leaned back. "Why you? Why protect her like that?" Ethan frowned, confused by the question. "She's my sister. No drama, no speech, just truth. When Mom died," Ethan continued quietly, "I promised her I wouldn't let anyone hurt Rosie. I promised out loud so she could hear." "How'd your mom die?" Rook asked. Ethan's voice thinned. "She got tired. Nobody pressed." A biker named Moose, quiet as a shadow, cleared his throat. "Kid," he said, "you been scared long." Ethan nodded. "Since I learned how." That was the moment something changed. These men weren't hearing a story anymore. They were being handed a responsibility, one they hadn't asked for but couldn't refuse. Rook stood, looked around the room. "You all know what this means," he said. Heads nodded. Slow, serious. Outside, rain hammered the roof like a countdown. And somewhere in the city, a man believed fear still worked. The call came at 2:13 a.m. Rook's phone buzzed once on the table. He didn't answer it right away. He looked at Ethan instead, curled up on the couch now, half asleep, one hand resting on Rosie's blanket like a shield. Rook stepped outside to take the call. "You got something that belongs to me," a voice said, calm, smiling. Rook recognized that kind of calm, the kind that thought it already won. "You got the wrong address," Rook replied. "I don't," the man said. "I know where you are, and I know who you are. You think wearing patches makes you untouchable." Rook glanced back through the window. 15 shadows moved inside. "Ready? You threatened a baby," Rook said. "That makes you real small." The man laughed. "Midnight heroes. I'll bring the law." Rook ended the call. Inside, he spoke quietly. Names were shared, histories connected. This wasn't random. This was rot, judges, papers, bad signatures, a system that had failed quietly for years. By dawn, engines would turn. Not for revenge, for protection. Sunrise came pale and slow. Ethan woke to the sound of coffee brewing and engines humming outside. He sat up, panicked, until he saw Rosie still there. Safe, warm. Rook knelt beside him. "Kid," he said, "today's gonna be loud, but you're not going anywhere." Ethan nodded, trusting. Brave in the way only kids forced to grow up too fast can be. Outside, bikes lined the street. More than 15 now, way more. Word had traveled, and when ordinary men choose to stand, the world listens. By mid-morning, the street outside the clubhouse didn't look real. Motorcycles lined both sides of the road, chrome, matte black, weathered paint, quiet engines ticking as they cooled. Men stood beside them, helmets under arms, patches from different chapters stitched across their backs. Not loud, not aggressive, just present. Ethan watched from the window. "How many are there?" he asked. Rook didn't answer right away. He counted instinctively, then stopped counting. "Enough," he said. Ethan nodded like he understood more than he should. Inside, Rosie slept in a crib borrowed from someone's sister. The room smelled like clean sheets and coffee, normal smells, safe smells. Ethan sat on the floor beside her, tracing circles on the carpet, grounding himself. Rook crouched down. "Listen to me, Ethan. Some people are going to ask you questions today. You only answer what you're comfortable with, nothing more." "What if they make me go back?" Ethan asked. Rook shook his head. "They won't." Outside, engines roared, not all at once, but in waves. A signal, not a threat. The bikes didn't race. They didn't rev to intimidate. They rolled out slow, deliberate, like a promise being kept. This ride wasn't about chasing someone down. It was about being impossible to ignore. They went to the courthouse first, parked legally, helmets off, silence loud enough to shake windows, then the foster agency, then the police station. Everywhere they went, doors opened. Questions started spreading. By noon, a woman from Child Services arrived at the clubhouse. She was careful with her words, too careful. "We've received concerns," she said. Rook handed her a folder, photos, medical reports, dates, times. Ethan watched her face change as she turned each page. "That baby," the woman said quietly, "she shouldn't have been breathing today." "No," Rook replied. "She shouldn't have." The woman swallowed. "We'll need to move quickly." Rook nodded. "We already are." For the first time since the knock, Ethan felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Wade Turner didn't look dangerous. That's what made him worse. He sat in an interrogation room later that afternoon, arms crossed, foot tapping, smiling like he'd done nothing wrong. He'd worn a clean jacket, combed his hair, practiced this version of himself. "You got no proof," he said. "Kids make up stories." Across the glass, a detective watched silently. Behind the building, motorcycles idled. Wade leaned back. "You really think a bunch of bikers scare me?" No one answered. The door opened. A different officer entered, older, calm, not part of Wade's circle. "We found your text messages," the officer said. "We found hospital records, and a judge who suddenly remembered some things." Wade's smile twitched. "You threatened a child," the officer continued, "multiple times. You violated parole." "That boy stole my kid," Wade snapped. "She's not your kid," the officer said. "She never was." For the first time, Wade's confidence cracked. Outside, Rook stood with crossed arms, helmet hanging from his hand. He wasn't angry. He was done. The officer stepped out. "He won't see tonight outside a cell," the officer said. Rook nodded once. No cheers, no victory laps, just engines shutting down. Back at the clubhouse, Ethan didn't ask questions. He read the answer on Rook's face. "Is it over?" Ethan asked. "For him?" Rook said yes. Ethan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. The quiet afterward felt strange. No sirens, no phones ringing, just afternoon light spilling across the floor. Rosie babbled in her crib, unaware she'd changed everything. Ethan sat beside her, smiling softly. "What happens now?" he asked. Rook sat across from him. "Now we make sure nobody ever scares you like that again." The social worker returned with paperwork. Temporary guardianship, emergency placement, safe housing. Ethan read every line. He didn't trust easily anymore. "You can stay here tonight," Rook said, "and tomorrow." Ethan looked around. "What about after?" Rook didn't rush the answer. "After," he said, "we figure out family." Ethan blinked. "Family?" Rook smiled slightly. "Yeah, the kind that shows up." Ethan nodded slowly. Processing, hoping but careful with it. That night, Ethan slept in a real bed, clean sheets, no yelling, no footsteps in the hall. He slept with one arm stretched toward Rosie's crib, just in case. Weeks passed. Court dates, reports, witnesses. The case spread wider than expected. More names surfaced. Quiet resignations followed. Ethan and Rosie stayed protected. Rook visited every few days, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just to sit. One evening, Ethan asked, "Why did you help us?" Rook thought for a long time. "Because someone should have helped me," he said finally. Ethan nodded. That was enough. Months later, the clubhouse door was repainted. Same steel, same place. But now, when it closed, it didn't feel as heavy. Ethan visited sometimes, taller, smiling more. Rosie learned to walk there. And every time Ethan knocked, just to say hi, someone always opened the door. No hesitation, no fear, just family. The courtroom didn't feel dramatic. No shouting, no gasp, just the hum of old lights and the scrape of chairs against tile. Ethan sat in the second row, feet dangling, Rosie asleep against his chest. He wore a borrowed jacket that was a little too big. He didn't mind. Rook sat behind him, not close enough to crowd, close enough to be there. Wade Turner entered in cuffs. He didn't look at Ethan. The judge did. She was older than Ethan expected. Soft voice, sharp eyes, the kind that missed nothing. She listened, didn't interrupt. Let the evidence speak. Photos, medical records, testimony from doctors who never forgot the night Rosie came in barely breathing. Text messages read out loud, stripped of bravado, naked in their cruelty. Ethan held Rosie tighter when the words got ugly. Rook placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Solid, steady. When it was over, there was no speech, no dramatic sentence, just consequences, parole revoked, charges filed, custody terminated permanently. The judge looked at Ethan. "You did the right thing," she said. "You were very brave." Ethan nodded. He didn't smile. Brave was something adults said when kids survived things they shouldn't have had to. Outside, reporters waited, cameras raised. Rook stepped in front of Ethan without thinking. Others followed. A quiet wall of leather and denim. No interviews, no statements. They left the way they came, calm, unremarkable, done. In the car, Ethan finally spoke. "He can't come back, right?" Rook shook his head. "Never." Ethan leaned his forehead against the window. The city moved by, ordinary, unaware. For the first time, that felt okay. Safety is loud at first, then it gets quiet. Ethan struggled with the quiet. At his new home, doors didn't slam. No one yelled his name in anger. Food appeared regularly. Rosie laughed more than she cried. Nights passed without fear. Ethan waited for the other shoe. It never came. He started school again, sat in the back, watched exits, learned that not every raised voice meant danger. One afternoon, a teacher asked him to read out loud. His hands shook. He did it anyway. At night, he still checked locks, still listened for footsteps. Healing didn't erase habits, it softened them. Rook visited less often now. That was the point. But when he did, Ethan ran to the door, not because he needed saving, because he wanted company. They talked about small things, motorcycles, movies, Rosie's first steps. Once Ethan asked, "Do you ever regret helping us?" Rook smiled. Not for a second. Ethan nodded, like he already knew. The story spread, but not loudly. No headlines, no viral clips, just word of mouth. A social worker told another. A nurse remembered. A judge mentioned it off the record. People spoke in lowered voices about bikers who showed up when no one else did. At the clubhouse, a small plaque appeared near the door. No names, just words. "If you knock, we answer." New members learned the rule early. Not about loyalty, about responsibility. Ethan came by on his birthday. Rosie toddled between boots and laughed when engines started. The men knelt to her level, always. Ethan watched them, understanding something adults took years to learn. Strength wasn't loud, it stayed. Years passed. Ethan grew taller. Rosie grew fearless. Life settled into something like peace. On one quiet evening, Ethan stood outside the clubhouse again. Older now, confident, he knocked 3 times. The door opened instantly. Rook smiled. "You didn't need to knock." Ethan smiled back. "I know." They stood there for a moment, the past and present sharing space without pain. Ethan looked inside. Same table, same walls, different meaning. "Thanks," Ethan said, "for that night." Rook shook his head. "You saved her. We just opened a door." Ethan thought about that as he walked away, about how doors change lives, about how someone always decides whether to open them. Years later, the rule still held. If someone knocked after midnight, you answered, not because you were fearless, but because someone once needed you to be. And somewhere out there, a kid learned that monsters don't always win. Sometimes they never get through the door. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe, like, and press the bell icon so you don't miss stories that remind us we're not alone. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Some doors are still waiting to be opened.